Okay, be honest. Have you ever told a lie? Even a tiny one? Of course you have. We all have. But what if I told you that lying isn't just some bad habit? What if it's actually a deeply wired survival mechanism, a core feature of what makes us human? Well, let's dive into the fascinating and, yeah, often uncomfortable truth about why we lie. To get a feel for just how common this is, let's kick things off with a pretty wild statistic from a study by psychologist Robert Feldman. He found that 60% of people, 60, told at least one lie within the first 10 minutes of talking to a total stranger. Think about that. Not one lie in a day, but in a single, short conversation. So this really makes you wonder, right? It brings up a question that scientists and philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries. Is lying just a simple flaw in our character? Something we're supposed to stamp out? Or is it something way more fundamental, a feature of our biology that actually helped us survive and thrive? That's the big mystery we're going to unravel today.
All right, first things first. We have to get this idea out of our heads that lying is just for, politicians or con artists. It is a universal human habit. And there's a famous experiment that just brilliantly shows how willing regular, ordinary people are to bend the truth.
So, behavioral economist Dan Ariely sets up this experiment. He gives people a bunch of math problems and offers to pay them for each one they solve. Simple enough. When time's up, he tells them to shred their answer sheet and just tell him how many they got right. But here's the twist. The shredder was rigged. It didn't actually destroy the paper. And the result? A whopping 70% of people lied, claiming they solved more problems than they really did. But here's what's really fascinating. People didn't go crazy with it. They didn't lie as much as they possibly could have. On average, they actually solved about 4 problems, but they said they solved 6. See? They told a calculated lie, just big enough to get a little extra cash, but small enough that they probably wouldn't get caught. It shows this subtle, strategic approach to dishonesty that is just incredibly common. But to really, truly understand why we even have this impulse, we have to go way, way back. I'm talking millions of years before humans ever spoke their first word. Let's take a look at the animal kingdom to see how this whole thing got started. Deception is literally everywhere in nature. It's a fundamental tool for survival. A chameleon changes color, not because it's pretty, but to trick predators and prey. A possum plays dead to avoid becoming lunch. Primatologist Franz de Waal even saw chimpanzees intentionally walk in the wrong direction just to mislead their rivals about where they hid some food. Now that isn't just instinct, that is calculated deception. So what does it take to pull off a lie like that? Well, it requires a kind of cognitive superpower called theory of mind. It's basically the ability to understand that other beings have their own thoughts, their own beliefs that are totally separate from yours. To fool someone, you first have to imagine what they believe, and then figure out how to manipulate that belief. And crazy enough, it's the exact same skill that allows for empathy and deep social connection. And this perfectly leads into something called the social brain hypothesis. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar suggested that our brains got so huge not so we could do calculus, but so we could manage our incredibly complex social lives. This created a kind of cognitive arms race. As our ability to deceive got better, so did our ability to detect deception, shaping the very structure of our brains over thousands and thousands of years. Okay, so let's zoom in now from our deep evolutionary past to the development of a single human being. Because this superpower of deception, it doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's a skill we learn, and we start learning it at a surprisingly young age. I absolutely love this quote from Professor Kangley, who's an expert on childhood development. He argues that we shouldn't scold a child for their first lie. Instead, and get this, we should celebrate it. Seriously. It means their brain has developed these crucial cognitive abilities, like theory of mind, that are absolutely essential for social life. It's actually a sign of a healthy developing mind. And this skill, it develops fast. Professor Lee's research shows that at 2.5 years old, only about a third of kids can tell a convincing lie. But by age 4, that number jumps to over 80%. And by the time they're 7, it's a nearly universal skill. Lying, it turns out, is a learned and practiced part of growing up. Okay, so we've seen that deception is rooted deep in our evolution and it develops early in childhood. But what actually happens inside our brains when we, as adults, decide to tell a lie? Let's get into the neuroscience of it all. So most of the lies we tell every day are what we call white lies. And they usually fall into 2 main buckets. You've got self-oriented lies, which are all about protecting ourselves, like saying, "Sorry, I'm late, car trouble," just to avoid a fight. And then there are other oriented lies, the ones we tell to protect someone else's feelings. You know, the classic, "Oh, your baby is so cute." These little lies are like a social glue, smoothing over the rough edges of our daily interactions.
Hey, just a quick pause here. If you're finding this deep dive into lying as fascinating as I do, this is exactly the kind of stuff we love to explore here on The Fascinating Origin of Things. So if you could please take a quick second to like this explainer, maybe share it with someone who'd find it interesting, and definitely subscribe so you never miss another one. Your support really does help us keep making these. Okay, back to it.
Now, here's where it gets a little bit scary. Neuroscientist Tali Sharot discovered that our brains literally adapt to dishonesty. The very first time you tell a small lie, your amygdala, that's your brain's emotional alarm system, it fires up and gives you that pang of guilt. But with each lie you tell, that signal gets weaker and weaker. Your brain actually becomes desensitized, which makes it cognitively easier to tell bigger and bigger lies. It's a literal slippery slope built right into our neurology. So, this leads us to the great paradox at the very heart of this story. If deception is so deeply wired into our biology and our brains, why do we value honesty so much? Why does being lied to feel like such a profound, personal betrayal? Well, the answer is that honesty is equally evolutionary. As a highly cooperative species, trust is the absolute bedrock of everything we do, from our friendships to our economies. Without trust, society just falls apart. So we evolved, not just as the world's most sophisticated liars, but also as its most sophisticated lie detectors. And that creates this constant, fascinating tension between these two powerful drives. And here's the crucial point. Choosing to be honest isn't the easy way out. It's not a passive default. Studies from University College London show that telling a difficult truth actually lights up the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain responsible for long-term thinking and impulse control. Honesty is an active, cognitively demanding choice. It requires us to override the short-term comfort of a lie in favor of long-term integrity. And making that active choice has real, tangible benefits. A really cool study from the University of Notre Dame found that people who consciously cut down the number of small lies they told by just 3 per week, they reported significant improvements in both their mental and their physical health. I mean, think about that. Lying less literally made them feel better. So, after all this, what have we learned? Well, maybe deception and honesty aren't really opposites locked in some epic moral battle. Maybe they are two sides of the same remarkable coin, our highly evolved social intelligence. They're both tools that we developed to navigate an incredibly complex social world. You know, we started this whole journey seeing lying as just a simple flaw, but we've discovered it's a fundamental part of our evolutionary story, our brain chemistry, and even how we grow up. So the real question isn't whether we can eliminate deception. We can't. The real question is, now that we understand the tools in our cognitive toolbox, which one will we consciously choose to build our relationships and our world with? Thank you so much for watching. If this story made you think, please share it with someone today. We drop new origin stories every single week here on The Fascinating Origin of Things, so be sure to subscribe. Until next time, stay curious.